Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. John Adam Brewer Jr. was no longer an active captain in his local sheriff's department, but the thought process of an officer of the law never really changes. In 2011, John, having some type of mental episode, believed that his neighbor was a wanted fugitive. John also believed that he was a U.S. Marshal. He was not. And he believed it was up to him to capture his neighbor and bring him in. The incident, as you can imagine, didn't go well, and John ended up shooting at his neighbor, injuring him. Luckily, the neighbor survived the shooting, but John, of course, would be arrested. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was sent to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. In early May of 2013, John was released from the hospital and was sent to live in a halfway house in Nashville, Tennessee. Just a few days after his arrival there, however, something odd happened. John woke up before breakfast and called for a taxi cab. The cab driver took him to Pegram, Tennessee, where John was from, and dropped him off at the Community Bank and Trust. There was a confrontation at the bank, which ended with the local police being called in. Law enforcement showed up to the scene 10 minutes later, but John was gone. John hasn't been seen or heard from since. Where is John Adam Brewer Jr.? Hello, and welcome to the Where Are They podcast in a bonus episode, another unsolved missing persons case. The story of John Brewer is bizarre, and what I also find very interesting is that John, a former sheriff's captain, was never really given the time and attention from authorities. In fact, it would take years before he was even recognized as a missing person. Was this delay because of his mental health history? Why wasn't his case investigated immediately, especially since officers should have seen him as being one of their own, a former member of law enforcement himself? Authorities definitely dropped the ball on this case, and while now, 11 years later, it is doubtful that John is still alive, his children and grandchildren want answers. They deserve answers, and so does John. John Adams Brewer Jr.'s life is a bit of a mystery. He did have a career in the Davidson County Sheriff's Department in Tennessee, and he did have 3 children. Davidson County is located in Middle Tennessee and includes the city of Nashville and the surrounding cities and towns. John made it up to the ranking of captain, the designation that follows lieutenant. After retirement, John continued to live and reside in Pegram, Tennessee, which was located in the neighboring Cheatham County. This will become important when it comes down to his missing person investigation. Cheatham County is about a 20-minute drive from Nashville, Tennessee, so it's still fairly close. It's often been named one of Tennessee's most favorable places to live due to its proximity to amenities, cost of living, and safety. In 2011, for reasons that are still unclear, John developed some significant mental illness. Law enforcement officials are 19% more likely to suffer from mental illness compared to the general population. They do have a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. This, of course, is due to the fact that they are continuously, over and over, exposed to high-stress situations and often are witnesses to traumatic events. We don't know exactly what John's medical diagnosis was, but his illness was severe enough he began having delusions. He believed his neighbor was a wanted fugitive, and he identified himself as a U.S. Marshal. Neither of these was true. John fully believed this, however, and confronted his neighbor with the intention of capturing him. He thought it was his job as a U.S. Marshal. The neighbor would end up being shot, and John would be arrested. Thankfully, the neighbors survived the attack. John would go on to be found not guilty by reason of insanity in 2011 and was sent to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. This is a psychiatric hospital located right in Nashville. During this time, John also had strained relations with family. These relationships seemed troubled prior to the incident, but family has since come out and said that they believe his mental illness had actually begun much earlier and played a role in impacting their relationship. In early May of 2013, John was finally released from the institution and was sent to live at a halfway house in Nashville. Just a few days after moving in, however, John did something strange. He woke up before breakfast and called for a taxi cab. John took the taxi to Pegram, Tennessee, where he had been living prior, and he was dropped off at the Community Bank and Trust. Once inside, he approached a teller and originally asked to withdraw $200. John did have an account at this bank, and he had plenty of money in his account. He then asked to speak to another employee at the bank, someone that he knew, but the woman couldn't come out and speak to him right away. This upset John and caused a bit of a scene. At this time, he changed his mind and asked for $500 instead of $200. Again, he had plenty of money in his account, so this was not an issue. His behavior, however, was becoming problematic. Finally, the woman did come out and speak to John, but John was already worked up by this time. While he took his money, he asked this woman if she could give him a ride somewhere. She said no, she couldn't. She could not leave work. It's interesting. We don't know exactly where he was asking to go, which I think could be a clue in this case. With this woman refusing to give him a ride somewhere, this further irritated John, and bank employees called the local police department. John walked out of the bank minutes before law enforcement showed up. The policeman that arrived on the scene took the report and believed that John had just been a disgruntled customer, and since he was no longer at the scene, there wasn't much else they could do. Plus, they kind of believed the issue had resolved himself. He was causing a scene, the bank wanted him to leave, and he left. Of course, no one realized at that time that that would be the last time John Brewer Jr. would be seen. They didn't realize that John had vanished into thin air. Now, it's also unclear who initiated the original call to authorities to try and report John missing. His family was pretty much estranged at this point, so I'm thinking it was likely someone from the halfway house or whomever John was supposed to be reporting to. But there was a problem. Even though John had been living in Nashville, the Nashville Metro authorities said the report had to go through Cheatham County, since that's where he was last seen. Cheatham County didn't want to take the report because John didn't reside there. He resided in Nashville. It would actually be 3 years before an official report was filed. If there were any clues, sightings, or answers as to what happened to John that day right after he left the bank, they'd be a lot harder to find now, 3 years later. His family became involved eventually, hoping and searching for answers. But sadly, they continued to get the runaround also. No one wanted to take on this case, and no one felt it was their responsibility. John disappeared in 2013. A report was finally taken in 2016, but it would be 2019 before a new detective came on the case to try and get some answers. He reached out to the taxi cab company for any information on John's ride to Pegram and if he had possibly left the bank in a taxi cab. But sadly, they informed the detective that they don't hold on to records that long. I mean, by now it had been 6 years since John vanished. Because of the length of time that had gone by, clues were few and far between. Authorities and the family continued to battle over what could be done and what was being done. The odd part to me is it always seems law enforcement sticks together. John Brewer Jr. was one of them. Didn't they owe it to this former sheriff's captain to find out what happened to him? Or had his mental illness caused such a break between everybody? Why didn't anyone want to investigate his disappearance? Why has this family had to fight so hard to even get a callback, to even get an official report filed? John's children eventually inquired about getting TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, involved in the search, and they were told that they had to be invited by either law enforcement or the district attorney. Neither have been willing to ask the TBI for assistance on this case, so they have never helped in this investigation. In recent years, with new detectives popping in here and there and taking a look at the case, the family has on occasion become hopeful. But each time, the hope is quickly replaced with disappointment. It seems when the investigators can't find any answers, the case is simply put to the side once again in favor of more recent cases. Will John's case ever be solved? Will we ever know where he went when he left the bank? I think it's possible either John will be found or because someone comes forward with some crucial information, such as where John went that day or who else may have seen or interacted with him. We just need that missing piece of the puzzle. Someone out there might have the information that could lead to answers and they don't even know it. John is described as a Caucasian male standing 6 foot tall and weighing around 215 pounds when he was last seen in May of 2013. He has gray hair and brown eyes. John has a scar on his head and a tattoo of his nickname Johnny on his upper left arm. John also has a history of troubling behavior and mental illness. Anyone with any information on the whereabouts of John Adam Brewer Jr. is asked to contact the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department at 615-862-8600 or the Cheatham County Sheriff's Department at 615-792-2021. Since his disappearance, John now has 3 grandkids that he has never met. The kids still talk about their missing grandpa. His family has also set up a Facebook group. Please go give that a follow and show your support to the family. You can find that at Missing John Adam Brewer Jr. Thank you for listening to John's story today, and thank you for being a supporter of our show. Let's keep working together and get these missing person cases resolved and bring the families the answers that they so desperately need. Someone out there just might know something. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons story. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.